folks still grabbing some tea and coffee and snacks, but we'll get started with our second session titled Exploring the Impact of Candy-like Characteristics on Medication Adherence in Pediatric and Geriatric Populations. Starting us off with this session, I'd like to welcome Dr. Rachel Meyers, clinical professor at the Ernest School of Pharmacy at Rutgers University. Dr. Meyers will be speaking on the impact of candy-like characteristics on medication adherence in pediatric populations.
All right, thank you so much, Brandon, and thank you to the FDA for inviting me to come here. Again, my name is Rachel Meyers. I am a pharmacist by training, specifically a pediatric pharmacist. I am faculty at Rutgers, but I spend most of my time in my hospital, where I practice in the pediatric ICU and also the general pediatrics floor. So that is my background. I've been in this position for 16 years now. Just as a quick disclosure, I am a consultant for CMP Pharma and also for Wolters Kluwer. So today I get to talk about something I'm very passionate about within pharmacy, and that is giving medication to children. I should also mention as my background that I am also a parent of 2 children, so I have lived the life. I know what it is like to have your child spit medicine at you, and yeah, the difficulties that we have with dosage forms. I also work with our transplant clinic. We have a very large kidney transplant center at my hospital, and I see all of our pediatric patients on the day they come to be listed on the transplant list. And we go through all of the medications that they're going to need to be able to take, and my basic summary for them, their homework from me, if they do not know how to swallow in solid dosage form, that is their homework, to figure that out before they get called with a transplant. Because some of the medications that we have for our younger kids, the liquid formulations, are just very difficult to take, and transplant patients have to take those medicines every day. And so if they can swallow a solid oral dosage form, their life is going to be so much easier. So we're going to talk about some of those alternate dosage forms. We're also going to talk a little bit about toxicity. I know there's some speakers later in today that are going to really focus in on that, so I won't get too much into that. I want to give just sort of my take on what candy-like might be, as a mother and a pediatric pharmacist, and talk about some adherence issues and some things that we can do maybe outside of the candy realm. So as we know, the issue with giving medications to kids is that quote-unquote inability to swallow that solid oral dosage form. And I'm going to sort of bring that into question a little bit because I think we need to think a little bit out of the box when we think about giving medications to children. However, this has led to this idea that we can't swallow solid oral dosage forms has led to the development of more and more liquid orals. And that's sort of the classic way that manufacturers make medications pediatric friendly. Now liquids, though, sometimes the thought is, oh, it's liquids, you can give it to a child. Well, I think as most people in this room have realized who have had children and given medication to children, that is not always the case. We have a lot of taste issues, as we talked about earlier today. That is my #1 complaint. This last month, I got complaints from nurses more and more. Our prednisolone tastes terrible. They're spitting it all over the place. Can we please change the brand that we're ordering? And I talked to my purchaser, and she said, I don't know what they're talking about. It's the same brand. I've been ordering the same brand for 5 years. So something must have changed because the number of complaints I'm getting are rising. So these taste issues are a big problem. Volume is huge. The volume that some of the medications come in is extraordinary what they think a child can take. In one case, there's a particular steroid on the market. The volume needed to dose our children would be 50 milliliters and up. And so we're just not going to do that. So we give the IV formulation orally because we find workarounds in pediatric medications. This is what we do. It's part of the tricks of the trade of being a pediatric pharmacist is finding the right workarounds. Texture was mentioned earlier. Even in liquids, texture is a problem. Augmentin is my classic example. It is very greeny and highly objectionable to children, including my own. Smell is also a big problem. We have lots of medications who have very poor smell, liquids. But what has happened is we have this development of alternative dosage forms because some of these liquids are still so objectionable. So just looking around on the market and looking for pictures of things and what's out there. Again, most of the candy-like ones are these gummies, but you might even define a chewable tablet as a candy, right? It depends how we decide to define it. I was looking, just as a side note, into sugar content of some of these. Now, the OTC ones all have the sugar content on them, but I reached out to the manufacturers of Tylenol and asked them, what is the sugar content of the tablets? And I was told that that was proprietary information. I was not allowed to know. So I don't know what the sugar content is in that, but that would be good information to have even in this OTC product. Also remember that there's compounding pharmacies that are out there that are compounding things, and gummies are something that are being offered even in the compounding space. One that concerns me and one that we have seen cases of is chloral hydrate, which is no longer on the market as a drug, but you can actually buy the powder. A compounding pharmacy can still produce this, but we have seen adverse events from this product. And so just because it's not on the market doesn't mean it's not still out there and coming from these compounding pharmacies. So that is a concern of mine as a pharmacist. So the risks that I see with candy-like medicines is, as we've touched on already, the idea of overdose, again, it being too desirable. When I was in my training, I went and did a poison prevention talk to a group of elementary school children, and we had, our examples of, what's a poison, we have the Tide Pods, that kind of thing to show them and talk about what's a poison, and we talk about how medicine, well, it may not be a poison, it's something that you don't take unless you have a grown-up with you and a grown-up telling you what to do. And I remember I was holding this bottle of gummy vitamins, and at the end, I asked the kids, does anybody have any questions? And one child raised their hand, and I said, yes. He said, can I have one? So again, there's that idea of that desirability factor that we're not seeing it as a medicine, we're seeing it as a treat. So I would like to focus, and my thoughts on candy-like is that idea of the sugar content. And a lot of these gummies, I quickly scanned around and I found there were anywhere from 1 to 3.5 grams of sugar per gummy. And some of those products, as depending on your age, your dose may be 2 gummies, so therefore you're going to have double the sugar dose, which is up to 10% of that recommended daily allowance for sugar. And so when we're getting that much sugar from a medicine or a supplement, we have the risk for dental caries, right, and also just added sugar in your diet. And remember that these vitamins and supplements are something that children are generally taking every single day. This is not an antibiotic with a 10-day duration. This is a daily therapy. And so when that's just part of their regular diet, that's a concern to me as a healthcare practitioner. And then I know our colleague from the USP mentioned this, but the ingredient consistency for me as a pharmacist, I like things to be very exact. It needs to have in it what it says on the label. And I am not thrilled with the idea of the stability of gummies and their ability to give patients the amount of supplement that we need. I know we think of vitamins as sometimes not necessary, but we have had patients, actually a few in the last couple of years, with vitamin deficiencies come in. We've had a case of scurvy. We've had a couple cases of rickets that have come in, and I practice in New Jersey, right? This is the suburbs. This is not, a third world country, but we have cases of these, and we send patients home, and I want to know that the vitamin dose that I'm calculating and helping the pediatricians send the patient home on, I want to know that it's the right amount that that patient is getting, because when I have a kid on IV vitamin C for a week, and then I'm sending him home on an oral, I want to make sure it's going to provide the amount that it says on the label. So, of course, our overdose risks, again, touched on a little bit earlier, but the biggest thing we worry about in children is the iron overdose. And, of course, you can see that pretty quickly when large volumes of vitamins are consumed at once. Generally, that 60 mg per kg is considered that toxic dose. And then, of course, calcium in overdose also can be quite toxic. Those are kind of the two that I worry about the most. When I was scanning the literature, I found this interesting case actually out of Philadelphia. This was a 21-month-old child who was chronically overdosed with Little Critters calcium and vitamin D3 gummies. This was a mother with she had some mental health issues, and she was chronically giving multiple vitamins to her child daily, and it was very unclear from the history how long this had been going on, but for a very long time. And the child came in very, very ill. And so the case report really emphasized that this was obviously medical neglect and a very unique form of it. But this is something that if that medication hadn't tasted that good, maybe she wouldn't have had such an easy time to administer this medication multiple times in a day. But because it is such a desirable and treat-like dosage form, it was able to be given for a long period of time. So what are the alternatives? We talk about chew tabs, make a long story short, chewable tabs don't taste that great either. And then, of course, we talk about liquids already. Here's my issue that I've encountered and sort of been mystified by just as a parent. My kids are 10 and 12. My 12-year-old has been able to swallow a tablet since she was about 7 or 8. And there are no swallowable tablets, multivitamins on the market for children. It's either a chewable tablet or a gummy. Or at least I've not been able to find one. As a parent, I've searched on Amazon, I've looked in pharmacies. They're not out there because there's this idea that if it's a child, the child cannot take an oral solid. And I just want to challenge that because my daughter complains about it to me. She says, I don't like the gummies. They're gross. I don't want to chew on this candy like in the morning. And the chew tab she finds disgusting also. So, and if it was a swallowable tablet, she would much prefer that. So what if we simply make solid dosage forms that kids can swallow? Why does it have to be candy-like? That, for me, again, as a parent and as a pharmacist, I think we have to get away from this idea that all kids can't swallow oral solids. So can children swallow tablets? This is an idea that in the prescription space has been explored by a lot of companies, and there's a lot more stuff coming out. There are studies out there showing for the mini tablets, which again have specific definitions, and they're having their own issues with defining what exactly a mini tablet is versus a granule. But there are studies out there down to 2 days old giving these mini tablets to basically newborn infants. And children as young as 4 have been shown to swallow tablets that weren't necessarily mini tablets, but up to 10 millimeters. They did a study looking at what kids can actually swallow. So I guess sort of outside the realm of this, what is a candy like, my kind of outside of the box question is, why do we have to have medicines that are candy-like? Now, of course, I recognize we live in the United States, it's a very consumer-based, driven economy, and these are OTCs, and consumers are going to pick what they like. But I think we need to shift the perspective that we have to make medication desirable. Oops. Okay, I'm not advancing. Let's try this. No. Okay, sorry, I'm not able to advance my slides. There we go. Okay, so how would I define candy-like? In my opinion, it's about the sugar content. To me, a gram or greater per dose unit, like an individual gummy, is candy. And that is too much, both for the dental carie issue, but also for dietary reasons. Again, I want to just wrap up by saying that kids can swallow oral dosage forms. Not 100% of kids, but I think we also need to get in the habit of thinking that if a kid can't, then maybe we need to train them and make that part of growing up, that swallowing a tablet is something that you need to learn to do. I do also want to emphasize that we always encourage our consumers to choose products that have ingredient quantities verified by parties such as USP. That, to me, as a pharmacist, is extremely important, that we're picking products that are reliable and that have in them what it says on the label. So again, there's that delicate balance between making medications acceptable and desirable. I really like the idea of limiting that sugar content. And also, to touch on, we need child safety packaging, of course. Again, the case report I gave you was about a case of a mother who had a mental illness. So obviously, when an adult is helping you with this, that's not going to help. But I think child safety packaging, again, needs to be stressed. And then clear directions about correct dosing. I think it was brought up earlier too, we also need to say on the labeling the dangers of overdosing, right? And what is the dose limit for a day, and why consumers should not consume more than is recommended. And that needs to be more clear, especially when we have dosage forms that are this desirable. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Dr. Meyers. So next we'll hear from Dr. Catherine Tuleu, professor in pediatric pharmaceutics at the University College London School of Pharmacy. Dr. Tuleu is joining us virtually, and her presentation is titled International Perspectives, Appropriate Pharmaceutical Design of Oral Medicines in Pediatric and Geriatric Populations.
Good morning, and thank you very much for the organizers for my invitation to talk at this workshop on defining candy-like non-prescription drug and to give you international perspective on appropriate pharmaceutical design of oral medicines in pediatric and geriatric population. My name is Catherine Tuleu. I'm professor in pediatric pharmaceutics at UCL School of Pharmacy, and I have been working in the field of pediatric drug delivery for 20 years now, which has led me to pave the field of sensory pharmaceutics. I founded EUPFI, the European Pediatric Formulation Initiative, in 2007, so concomitantly to the enforcement of the EU pediatric regulation. And it is a consortium working in a pre-competitive way on pediatric drug formulation. And I have a vested interest in pharmaceutical sensory evaluation that led me to my spin-out company, Senseutics Limited, that offers a full spectrum of preclinical, clinical, and pediatric formulation services under one roof. So as I am starting, I just want to give a little map of my talk, and maybe that will act as a disclaimer. So I'm going to touch upon the similarities and differences between pediatric and geriatric-centric oral drug product design, and we're going to talk about target product profile within the regulatory framework, so within the guideline or guidance that we've got. I'm going to talk mainly about prescription drug products because this is what I'm working with. And although obviously I'm international, I'm mainly a EU citizen who lives in UK, so my perspective is mainly from England. And I just want to point out that in Europe we've got a very fragmented market. We've got multiple jurisdictions, multiple languages, as you can see on the map. We are culturally very diverse, so very diverse consumers, and we've got different prescription habits in between countries, which further complicates the landscape. And that means as well that although in America you've got one FDA, in Europe many food and many drug administration are often two very separate entities, which again complicates the OTC markets. Talking of which, I also want to point out that on the top, this is shelves of OTC products in America, and the equivalent in UK, for example, would be that we've got much less choices in over-the-counter products. And again, I want to highlight that this is a personal reflection I had about the topic I was given. So we're going to talk about patient-centric drug product design, considering those three entities, and we're going to start with the patients. And as my brief stated, I'm going to talk about the young and the old. So developing children medicines is not a child's play, and children are defined by the ICH E11 topic as newborn, so 0 to 28 days, infants and toddlers 28 days to 23 months, children 2 to 11, and adolescents 12 to 18. And it's mainly driven by their developmental age, so how they're going to handle the drug and the excipients. We're going to go back to that. However, this category 2 to 11 kind of miss out a little bit the consideration around physical and behavioral age, which which is driven by tremendous changes in that children population, and that's really what we consider as formulators. So the various consideration, so we've got a moving targets, and the various consideration for each pediatric subset is the route of administration, the dosage form including the excipients, the dosing, the acceptability of the dosage form, and how it's going to be administered. Is there any food beverages included and or devices? We have a guideline in Europe on pharmaceutical development of medicines for pediatric use, and it's a good resource to get some information on what to consider when you're developing an enteral product, and which would have to include age specificity, the condition of the patient, the duration of therapy, the dosage regimen, etc. And there is, I want to highlight, specific part on excipients in the formulation and on patient acceptability, and I will talk about that a bit further. And because acceptability is in fact a key binding element in the pediatric investigation plans, which are the equivalent of your PSP in America. And acceptability is defined as the overall ability and willingness of the patient and caregiver to use the medicinal product as intended. So from the moment where they unbox the medicine, they are in contact with the leaflets, then there is the primary packaging, and then there is what they do with this primary packaging till they administer the dose. So really, you know, this is a very organic way to look at the acceptability from the documentation that comes with the box, but as well the complexity of the administration, how it's administered with a device or not, the dosing volume, the number of tablets, if the tablets can be broken, and frequency of administration, but as well ending up with obviously, you know, what the product itself looks like, its appearance, its palatability, and of course its swallowability. And I would like to point out those two guidelines, one from the MEA that I've already mentioned, but as well there is a very good WHO guideline development on of pediatric medicines. And again, it's a key binding element, so companies have to demonstrate acceptability of their product. For the geriatric population, it's a little bit less signposted. So the age subgroups proposed by the ICH topic E7 is early old, 65-74-year-old, middle old, 75-84-year-old, and late old, over 85. However, this often does not reflect the biological age, and there is a further physiological approach that uses the classification of fit or frail old adult. And compared to children, this is very complex because obviously older adults have comorbidities. They've got sensory deficits like issues with swallowing that increases, cognitive impairments, and or physical frailty. And there is no guidelines. However, the MEA had proposed a geriatric strategy in 2011 that is framed on the same topics that have been discussed for children. And I borrowed that slide from my very good colleague, Dr. Mine Orlu, who is a professor in my department. And I really like the way to compare the young and the old. So starting from the packaging that on one hand needs to be childproof, but on the other hand needs to be geriatric friendly and simple. In terms of compliance, we know that palatability is a big issue in kids, and dysphagia is more prominent in adults. PK, there is variation in age group. In kids, considered to be mainly due to body weight, which is not necessarily true for the very young, so up to 2 years old, and it's complex in older adults because of the comorbidity, the polypharmacy. In terms of the carers, for the young, it's mostly healthy caregivers, where for the older adults, the other caregiver might be another older adults. So that can further complicate this aspect. In terms of adaptation of the dosage form, often for kids, we liquidized the formulation, whereas for older adults, you try to mitigate the pill burdens. And of course, we talked about the immaturity and frailty and heterogeneity of the population. Okay, so now if we move on to the other aspect of our product design is the drug substance. And of course, what is important to consider is the dose, is the therapeutic index of the API, but as well the quantity of the API in each dose and the pack size. And in fact, in the guideline, the applicants who are going for a PIP submission needs to consider the dosing recommendation and duration, but as well accidental dosing error, specifically the risk of tenfold overdosing, accidental ingestion of the full content linked with patient acceptability. So it feels that really there is more safeguard around prescription medicines. First, you need to abide to the 5 rights rule. The drug is prescribed for a specific patient at a specific dose, for a specific route of administration, and for a specific duration. Whereas for OTCs, they're products that can be bought by consumer without a prescription at a pharmacy or another retail outlet, and usually these products are to treat minor ailments. However, we know from the past as well that there has been withdrawal of, for example, for children, many cough and cold medicines for children under 2 because they were containing API such as antihistaminic, antitussive, and expectorants that could have led through overconsumption to safety issues. So now let's move on the drug product, probably more relevant to the discussion today. And I just want to point out that adherence is quite complex, as you probably all know. But for children, medication factors are major challenge. So this is the result of a EU study where almost 652 children were asked, why do you find some of the medicines difficult to take? And as you can see, most of them answered the taste. So palatability is the #1 issue in children. And as you can see, difficulty in swallowing tablets and capsule comes not too far down, but is certainly probably more prominent in older adults that need to take multiple dosage forms. Now, in terms of palatability, going back to my guideline on pharmaceutical development of medicines for pediatric use, in the palatability section, there is a statement, even though it's asking the applicants to really give example of how they've improved the palatability of their pediatric preparation, there is a statement that says as well that it must not become too attractive to children, candy-like, as it is known to increase the rate of accidental poisoning. And so really, it's tricky then to find a definition of candy-like prescription dosage form, because on one hand, we're asked to make the dosage form more desirable, more palatable, easier to handle, easier to dose. But of course, for prescription medicine under the EU regulation and the guideline provided, you really need to have a rationale for your excipients. So, you know, and it's especially stated in this document that you really need to consider the colors that you're adding, the flavors, and the sweetening agent. So really there is a remit to keep that within a safe boundaries. And as well, I think what we've got in Europe is different commercial pressure, especially for prescription drugs. First, there is no advertisement at all. It's a much more fragmented market, as explained before, but in terms of pricing of medicines as well, and it is less governed by private insurances. So that's really a big difference. So I feel that the big difference in between prescription versus non-prescription, potentially candy-like dosage form, is that one is consumer-led, whereas the other one is much more patient and prescriber-led. Okay, so we talked a bit about palatability. Now let's talk about swallowability. So again, this graph borrowed from this paper show that palatability is more good appearance, good palatability is more prominent for medicinal products for pediatrics, whereas as you can see, swallowability becomes more important for medicinal products for the elderly, but also present obviously for pediatrics. And in fact, when you looked at some medicines that look like candies, they all have in common that they are made easier to swallow. And I've put this example here of the fentanyl. People call them fentanyl lollipop. However, they are just lozenges, so suck-in type of dosage form of fentanyl, so very strong opioids. But there is as well some other lozenges, such as those fluorbiprofen, honey and lemon lozenges. And of course, another good example is the whole product range of nicotine. So for example, this example here goes from a mouth mist to a gum, a lozenges, nasal spray, a patch, an inhalator, and as well a microtab, so small tablets that is to be administered sublingually. And they're all governed, at least in UK, under different type of medicines. And it's interesting to see that in kids, in fact, there is a big trend in UK to try to train kids as early as possible to swallow solid dosage form. So, and in fact, those programs that are implemented in hospitals uses sweets to train kids to take solid dosage form as early as possible. So hundreds and thousands, Tic Tac, Smarties, and they need to play with that to train themselves to swallow. And again, interestingly, in 2008, WHO had an initiative called Better Medicines for Children Project, and really what they were advocating is flexible solid oral dosage form, meaning solid oral dosage form that behave like a liquid at the point of administration, so solids that do not need to be swallowed whole. So that would cover dispersible tablets, oral dispersible tablets, oral dispersible films, or even sprinkle capsules that you can mix with a swallowing aids, such as food or soft food or beverages. And as well, the big trend was around pushing for multiparticulates, so really giving the drug in a number of discrete units, so that covers granules, pellets, and mini tablets. And in fact, I've taken that from a big united landscape on innovative delivery system for pediatric medicines. And as you can see, in terms of the future of kids medicine, all the new medicine are heavily inspired by this candy sweets like dosage form. Dispersible film, we've got those mouth fresheners films that are on the market, or even those flying saucers that tend to disappear in the mouth when you take them. In terms of multiparticulates, the hundreds and thousands are a good example of that, and that children are very familiar with and that are easy to swallow. And as well, in terms of mini tablets, we've had for years, those very small sweeteners, which is really, what people are trying to use now to deliver drugs. And but on that list, I would like to single out 3D printing. In fact, 3D printing, has seen a tremendous and rapid progress, opening many opportunities and really bridging the gap towards personalized medicines. And it's, I think, especially interesting in compounding, when we think of a product for rare diseases or who do not have a pharmaceutical treatment, who are using, for example, chemicals. And one paper has been published. It's a Spanish survey on very few children, 4, but it's interesting that they've printed isoleucine for various age, weights, and measured the blood levels to treat maple syrup urine diseases, a very rare metabolic disease. And as you can see, the kids could choose their color, their flavor. And looking at the blood concentration, they showed that the printless gave really very good results compared to the standard of care, which was just putting the isoleucine in a capsule, and in fact a tighter blood level results. However, there are other products that are heavily inspired from the confectionery industry, and I did a very quick search and found few candy-like printless containing API. So you've got this first one with a soft chew, and they're offering to print it in any shape, bears, hearts, containing ranitidine. Then there was this interesting paper where it was some 3D printed cereals containing ibuprofen and paracetamol, and then this one, and there is more and more paper on using chocolate as a base, and this one was containing paracetamol. And I think, to me, that's really a reflection. We're entering a complex ecosystem where we want to make the dosage form more acceptable, if not desirable, but we don't want to jeopardize the safety, and that's a difficult exercise, a balance exercise. So just to conclude, or a conclusive remark is that, for sure, therapeutic success goes with better adherence, and of course I hope I've demonstrated, whether it's through palatability and swallowability, but if you increase acceptability, you're certainly on that way towards better therapeutic outcome, and hence the consideration around sensory pharmaceutics. So how can we play with formulation, dosage form, design factors and administration factors to facilitate that is certainly very interesting. But I think we need to keep in mind, and as it's stated in this ABPI poster, so the Association of British Pharmaceutical Industry, that the message needs to be clear for the users that medicines are not sweets, and it is not that simple. So I'm really looking forward. Thank you for listening, and I'm really looking forward all the discussion of today's workshop, because I think it's a fascinating topic. Thank you very much. Bye.
All right, I want to thank Dr. Tuleu once again. Our next speaker is Dr. Judith Chin, Resident Program Director and Professor of the Department of Pediatric Dentistry at Nova Southeastern College of Dental Medicine. The title of Dr. Chin's presentation is Use of Sedative Gummy Bears Compared to Oral Syrups in Pediatric Dental Patients. Thank you, Dr. Chin.
Good morning, everyone. I am a board-certified pediatric dentist, so I treat the kids that no one else wants to treat. And I wanted to give this presentation this is with conjunction of everyone else on my team who's helped over the years. So disclosure, I have no conflicts of interest to disclose. I do have to say, although I am a board-certified pediatric dentist and I sit on several of the committees for American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry, as well as the American Board of Pediatric Dentistry, this presentation isn't a representation of either of those national committees or national organizations. So a little bit about decay. We've come a long way with improvements over the decades, but there's still quite a bit of work to do. As a pediatric dentist, I have job security. I will always be busy. There is a lot of decay in the U.S. as well as internationally. It has changed, but with the dietary habits of the children, and as well as the parenting habits, we still have a lot of decay. So just a few notes. 50% of kids from ages 12 to 19 have a cavity in at least one of their adult teeth. Many phobics or phobias come from our childhood experiences. So if it's a bad experience in a dental office as a child, that traditionally carries on the rest of the life of that individual. With autism being 1 in 36 people in the United States, children, a significant number of my patients are patients who have autism. I do have to say, as a pediatric dentist, We don't see the majority of children in the United States. General practice dentists do. So we are referred the patients, traditionally, our best patient referral sources from our general practice dentists where they feel it's out of their training or scope or ability to treat them in a safe manner. As a pediatric dentist, I also see, in the state of Florida, we see up till age 21, and I'll see special needs adults. Safety is our number one concern. If we can't do it safely, we're not going to do it. We're just not going to do it. We follow guidelines and recommendations from national organizations, not just pediatric dentists, but anesthesiologists and pediatricians as well. We have to really take a lot of things into consideration when we're treating, when we want to treat a patient. How old is the patient? Are they neurotypical, or do they have cognitive concerns that we have to be aware? A 4-year-old patient is much different than a 10-year-old patient or a 16-year-old patient. How are we going to treat them? Family preferences are significant. The parenting style of that child. We only get them 1 day, maybe 3 days a year. They're in the house the rest of their life. We can't undo some parenting behaviors. We can't do that, but we can help modify it while they're in our office. We will always start with non-pharmacologic procedures. When this patient, when this child needs something, we're always going to go non-pharmacologic. Tell, show, do, watching a TV. I'm a horrible singer, but I sing. I do that in order to distract them from what I'm about ready to do to get them into a better state of health. But sometimes we have to do more things to make this procedure safe and comfortable for a child so that we don't create that phobic. So that's when we go into pharmacologic options, such as laughing gas or nitrous oxide. We can do that. We can do that safely. We follow all national safety measures. Sometimes, though, we need to either, if that doesn't work, we need to go to the next level, whether we're doing oral sedation, whether it be moderate sedation, mild sedation, oral or deep or general sedation. So for the United States, a lot of people like just take my kid to the operating room and get everything done. If they have state insurance, if they have Medicaid, or whatever that brand is in your state, it's traditionally at zero cost to the family, which is a very nice thing in the United States for kids. After they age out at 18 or 21, nothing's free. Everything costs. So cost can be a big concern, but even when it's free, for us to get into an operating room and to see this patient in the safest environment, there's a wait, there's a long wait. So we're telling our 3-year-old, 4-year-old medically healthy patient, yes, you have a mouth of decay. You have 20 teeth, and of your 20 teeth, 18 out of 20 of those teeth have cavities on them. We'll see you next year. We'll see you next year. And if something happens, you need to go to the emergency room if you develop extraoral swelling or a fever. Until then, the only patients who get moved up on that waiting list are patients who need transplants or patients who have cancer. We assure the families, thank goodness your child doesn't have that, but you will need to wait. So when it comes to sedating children, there's really two things which have been talked about often this morning and throughout the presentations. They don't like the taste, and it is difficult to administer on a child. Tablets are not as good as tablets, and there's actually been studies showing that if they could take a medication, the outcome for the sedation will be better. If they're willing to take it, the outcome will be better. So any child who we might sedate, it's because they've failed everything else. We've tried every other game that we can do, and we're not there. So we'll follow national safety sedation standards. They're out there, free to see. At our clinic, the two drugs that we traditionally use are midazolam and hydroxyzine. Midazolam is incredibly bad tasting. Hydroxyzine's slightly better, but you need a lot more volume for us to make it effective. I am not a pharmacist, but I will talk a little bit about midazolam. Why do we use it? Why do we use it? We use it because it's a quick onset. We use it because they actually do have an oral medication. Midazolam can come in different forms. It can be via IV. Kids don't like IVs. It could be inhaled, intranasal. They don't like anything wet going up their nose. So if they're not able to take a medication by pill, which most of our patients can't, we use this Versed. It has a reversal. That's why I love this drug. It has a reversal. So if a patient goes from moderate to deep sedation, we can reverse them in a timely manner so that our procedures still remain safe. Hydroxyzine. Hydroxyzine, we add that when a procedure is going to be longer. Midazolam doesn't last that long. So just as other presenters, when one drug is going off board, we need another drug on board. That's why we will use hydroxyzine for some of our patients when we know that the procedure is going to be long. The kid who fractured their front tooth and they're 8 years old and it's their adult tooth and now they need root canal therapy. Root canal therapy is hard on adults, let alone on a second grader. It's very challenging. So we need enough time so that we could do this safely. There's no reversal to it. And the volume that they need to take is significantly higher than it is with Versed. So after a long day, I was meeting with someone a couple years ago, and we were having an institutional luncheon, kind of a meet and greet, and it happened to be a pharmacist across from me. He's like, how's your day going? I go, not good. I literally had puke on me in the shade of Versed because they had just spit up and I didn't have enough time. And it was a bad week. The whole week was like that. And he had said, hey, have you ever thought about maybe doing it in a different form? I'm like, what forms? Because I know there are some out there. Fentanyl, the lollipops. That's nice, but it takes a long time to consume the lollipop. He's like, well, what about a gummy bear? I'm like, gummy bear? Tell me more. So we actually designed, he said, you can get a gummy bear. I can create a gummy bear for you in hydroxyzine or Versed. I can do that, and it will work. It will work. I was skeptic. You got to prove it to me. He was right. He was right. We had prescriptions made, individual prescriptions for the patients. And then after we saw that, I'm like, I think we need to evaluate this in depth a little bit more because this might help our patients. So we actually came up with 3 aims: developing these gummy bears, seeing if the kids like them, and seeing if it actually sedates the patient to a level that we need it to be. So on the picture, you'll see the forms that we used when they were compounded in the local pharmacy at our Nova pharmacy. We had independent variables and dependent variables. We love FACES. Truly, the hedonic scale, it's been vetted out and used many times for children. It's also great for stats because it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We can use that. It's a solid number. The effectiveness, how well did it sedate the patient? Mild, moderate, deep. How long did it sedate the patient? How much time did it take to sedate the patient from going from mild to moderate? All of that we looked at. We looked at age. We looked at gender. We evaluate them. So this form that you see, it's a completed form on a patient modeled off of what the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry has for monitoring sedation. By law, it must be evaluated every 5 minutes, but we're continuously monitoring. We don't wait every 5 minutes. We are continuously monitoring these patients as we're doing our dental treatment. We received IRB approval, and we had a total of 80 subjects, the liquid versus gummies, patients with autism and patients who are neurotypical. We tried to match as much as possible the procedures that they were done to equal out as much as possible. One kid's not getting a root canal while another kid's just having a simple little filling done. So we tried to match it as much as possible. The study's still underway. It's still going, but we'll talk data for most of the patients. Most of the study subjects that we had, we're able to get up data for them. So here are the results. We were able to do it, but we really had to take in some cultural and society influences. Gelatin traditionally is pork-based or beef-based, and we had to make sure in our population that it was halal or that didn't have pork in it, or if it did, we had to disclose it, and we do disclose that. It is, so in our gummy formulation, it was bovine, it was beef-derived. We chose that intentionally. It lasts 14 days because it's compounded. We use sucralose because I'm a dentist. I'm not putting sugar in there. I'm a dentist. That's they're in my place for a reason. But also sucralose is much more concentrated than sugar, as others have said in the past. So we don't have to use as much to get the effect that we need. Our flavors, yeah, we taste tested them without the prescription medication in them. What we thought the kids would use or not, and we had standard dosage sizes for each gummy. You can see that the gummies were clear. They're clear for a reason, because we don't want kids saying, I want the green one, I like the red one, where's the pink one? No, it's clear. It's a clear gummy. Isn't it cute? That's what it ended up looking like. It's adorable. With hydroxyzine, the hydroxyzine gummy was a little bit less clear than the Dazzlam gummy. Our results, anything in shades of red or pink are happy. They're joyful. So our shades, our patients overall, our study subjects liked the gummy. They preferred the taste better than the liquids. It was nice to see that. Very nice to see that. One subject spit the gummy out. I'll talk a little bit about that because it was an unexpected surprise. But these patients, it's not unexpected that they're going to spit something out. That's why they're being sedated. They're needing dental treatment. We tried everything else. As far as the onset time for moderate sedation was actually quicker than the syrup. So when the original dissolution studies were done for this particular gummy, fully dissolved within 15 minutes. The pH of midazolam and the pH of hydroxyzine is very acidic. Yay. Our bodies, our stomach acid is very acidic, so it was dissolved very rapidly into the system, which made it quite effective. And although it was not statistically significant for the time on that last slide, when you're talking to a 4-year-old, there is a ginormous difference in time between 16 minutes and 18 minutes. 2 minutes is an eternity. For the sedation levels, the levels were the same. And in fact, it was more consistent with our gummies as moderate sedation, not too deep, not too light, not mild conscious sedation, but moderate conscious sedation. So there was less variability for our gummies when they were used. We've had no adverse reports for this particular presentation and for this particular study for use of any of the gummies. So a little bit of discussion. It does seem like our patients and I say patients because they're my patients. I love these special kids. They are my special friends. They did like them. They had no idea that it was a drug. That was very intentional. With the syrups, kids know when you're getting a syrup, and we all know it, they sniff it. They swirl it around like a glass of wine. They want to see what it is. A gummy, game on. I haven't had anything to eat or drink for the last 8 hours. I'm ready to eat, and this dentist is giving me a gummy. They didn't even do the math that one would never work. They took it as quickly as they can. And how quickly did they consume a gummy? Gummies, it was 1 or 2 seconds per gummy. It's actually, in one of the previous slides, I had a lozenge. It's not a lozenge, it's a chewable gel. It is a chewable gel. It used to be classified as a lozenge. They eat it as quickly as they can. It's like a race. They don't let it dissolve and luxuriate throughout their mouth. They eat it as quick as they can. The one time that we had a patient spit it out, they did not spit out an ear. They did not spit out a paw. They spit out the whole entire gummy. So we knew exactly how much they spit out. That never happens with oral medications when they spit it out, liquid medications. You have to guess how much they spit out, but because of that, you can never re-administer. For pediatric dentistry, we can never re-administer. Oh, I think they spit out 4 mLs. Let's put 4 mL. No, we just have to roll the dice and see if this patient's going to get sedated so that we can do the work safely. So it was kind of nice that they spit it out because I never would have thought that that would happen, but it was a nice thing to see and to consider. We still have, when I submitted this presentation in, we had 13 subjects. We have 9 subjects left to go. We hope to be done with all of the data gathering by the end of December and then analysis by February. Future clinical trials, just a little bit harder to get everything compounded and picked up by the pharmacy. The parents, we don't allow the parents to pick it up. We pick it up. We don't want somehow that it magically did disappear. Or we're in South Florida, it's hot. It's really hot. They melt, gummies melt, whether it's in a hand or a car or something else. So we have these individually made, compounded, prescribed for each and every patient, and it works. Here are my references. And thank you to everyone for participating in this particular presentation, but also to everyone who helped me with getting this underway.
Thank you again, Dr. Chen. So that brings us to our second panel session. This panel discussion will go until 12:25 p.m. So our in-person panelists will be, again, Dr. Rachel Meyers and Dr. Judith Chen. And additionally, Dr. Catherine Tuleu will be serving as our virtual panelist. So it's also my pleasure to introduce our moderator for this session, Dr. Gilbert Burkhart. Dr. Burkhart is the Associate Director for Pediatrics in the Office of Clinical Pharmacology here at FDA, so welcome. And just a quick reminder, so for our panelists for this session and session 3, I think we've had some issues with these microphones, and I don't think there have been too many issues catching the audio online, but just to make sure everyone in the room can hear, we ask you to please just speak up closely to the microphone. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Those were 3 excellent presentations, and I'm now convinced that I want to get all of my dental care from Dr. Chen. Maybe not the gummies, but the dental care, I think. Okay, well, let's get to the real heart of things here, which Dr. Worthington, I think, started, and then, our 3 speakers here kind of jumped in on. And so let's ask the question of what's the place of these candy-like dosage forms in drug therapy? And so beyond the use in supplements, dietary supplements, and our USP colleague this morning kind of indicated there may be even some problems there in standardizing what's in them. But beyond the dietary supplements, if we talk about drugs now, I deal mostly with prescription, prescription drugs, new drug approvals, NDAs, BLAs, and the Office of Clinical Pharmacology. But even for OTC products, if you think about toxic drugs, think about acetaminophen, So is there a place for putting drugs in these candy-like dosage forms? So yes or no? Dr. Meyers?
I would say only in a very small number of circumstances. I guess the toxicity concerns are a big concern to me, and I think it's a very fine line that we're walking. And again, I think Tylenol is a good example. You need the child to be able to take it, but it can't be so good that it becomes desirable. So I think that's a very fine line. I think in general, when I talk to formulators in the drug industry, particularly about prescription products, when they talk about taste masking, there seems to be they would rather there be no taste, right? Because even when we give things a taste, if it's something you need a child to be able to take, not everybody has the same, likes the same flavors, right? Like I've had kids bring in, they don't like our Tylenol, so they bring in their brand from home. So if you can get away from taste at all and just make it something the patient has to take, I think that works better in general. That would be my opinion. Again, I just worry about toxicity and overdose. Yeah.
So that was a no. Okay. Dr. Tuleu, let's go to you. I really like that slide about the future dosage forms, because those are the things I see when you talk about dispersible tablets and well, we need to perhaps talk a little bit more about mini tablets, but you had a lot of dosage forms up there that are kind of on the horizon for pediatric patients or patients who have difficulty swallowing, but I didn't see candy-like dosage forms on there. So what is your vote? Should drugs be in these candy-like dosage forms?
If I've got only one answer, it would be no. Or like Rachel, in very limited number of drugs. It's true that what I showed are not candy-like, but they are very much inspired by candies. If you think of dispersible films or tablets that melt in the mouth, it's to overcome to increase the acceptability of it. So I think that what those candy tricks add is to really overcome incentivize the kids or the elderly person in terms of the willingness to take it and increase the ability to take it, if we're just talking about the sensory aspect of the dosage form. But I think it's dangerous if it's outside of a less regulated environment. And for example, I can see how the midazolam gummies works. I mean, within the context of a dental practice where, it's a one-off and it's given by the prescriber. However, the same thing at home, I would be extremely concerned about having that floating in the home. Or you overcome it with packaging, warning, storage, and but we know, as Rachel said again, and we've got the same issue in UK with the equivalent branded paracetamol, that kids love it. And so, I mean, it's taking a huge risk when you've got an active that is, that as a therapeutics window, a safety and therapeutic window that is not as large as other products.
Okay, so we have two no's, Dr. Chen. Did you invest in this company? No. That's making these gummies? No.
No.
Oh, okay. Well, you get to jump in here. I was talking primarily about commercial products, but please.
So no disclosures. Big Pharma has patents on every form of delivery that you could ever envision for a type of medication. I would like to say cautiously, yes. Yes. If it is better for the patient, if we can make sure that I work with the transplant team as well, if they can take that medication and take it on a consistent basis, that would be good. And I would flip the scenario just a little bit. In the United States, just say no to drugs, just say no to pills. For kids to say, I want you to start taking these pills and take them very easily and take them very young, I'm not sure that's also what we would want to advocate for due to such high misuse of prescription medication. So there has to be a balance, but I would say yes, I would take a gummy any day for my practice versus the oral medication.
Okay, well, let's talk about the scenario you gave us, because in the Office of Clinical Pharmacology, dose is job one, and you were individualizing the doses of those gummies for your patients, right?
Correct.
So if you were making them in a different situation, in other words, if you just had whatever gummy, you had to standardize the dose, or maybe they had to take 3 gummies, or does that defeat your scenario?
Well, I wouldn't say it defeats our scenario. So for my particular study, there were different weights, different ages. So some of the study subjects had to take 2 gummies. Some had to take 4. Some had to take 1 of one and 1 of the other. Any medication has to be dose-driven. So whether it's in the gummy form or liquid form, any medication has to be dose-driven. So I don't think that banishes the option of using something that would be candy-like.
How about other options for sedation? Because this brought back to mind a study I did at the Bonner Children's Hospital in Memphis in 1978, where we had computerized tomography was a new thing, but the kids had to be very, very still, right, while you did computerized tomography. So we did rectal thiopental. So I have a publication in 1978 on rectal thiopental. Why aren't you using rectal thiopental? No.
Great question. Not in my purview. But, there are medications that can be inhaled, can be rectally given. There's so many different options. I think it's a tool in the toolbox. It's one of our tools, not the only tool, but one very legitimate tool that could be used for delivering safe health care in the U.S.
Okay, well, that's Rachel, go ahead.
Yeah, so I know Dr. Chin mentioned intranasal briefly, that kids don't generally like it, but it is a dosage form, and this is what I tell my students, this is the up-and-coming dosage form for us in pediatrics, especially in our epilepsy population, where we were doing rectal diazepam for many, many years, but now we have a couple of different brands of intranasal benzos out there, and they are extraordinarily popular, because if you are 8 years old and you have a seizure in your classroom, where do you want to get your benzo from the school nurse? And generally they're unconscious, of course, at that point, or a lot of times they are. So that's been very popular. And the other areas in our emergency room, we give benzos, we give fentanyl, we give ketamine, we give dexmedetomidine, intranasal pretty routinely. And also, I practice at the burn unit for the state of New Jersey, and we use intranasal there as well for procedural pain. So intranasal is big. Oh, and the other example I would give is for glucagon for our patients with diabetes. In the past, there was a pretty unstable dosage form. You had to mix it and then give it, sub-Q, which isn't the greatest, and now we have an intranasal form. So compared to a sub-Q dosage form, that's a lot better for kids.
If I may follow up on that, so for dentistry and medicine, once we go intranasal, it's considered an IV administration or parental administration, and every state has laws specifically regarding that, and that would be considered more of a deep sedation. So for the state of Florida, I wouldn't even be allowed to do that. I would have to have an IV sedation permit. I must have treated many patients, have many more hours in the hospital during my training. I did 6 weeks of training, and that's the current regimen. For 6 weeks of training. For IV, you have to have 6 months of training. I do see patients in the emergency room, and that's where we use, when we're wonderfully supported by our emergency room physicians and our respiratory therapists, that's when we actually will use intranasal Versed, but not really an option for almost every pediatric dentist, maybe oral surgeons. They are regulated, almost all of them have that training and expertise to do parental administration.
Okay, how about the dispersible tablets? I think there's some limits in terms of what's available versus dispersible tablets, but using a dispersible tablet, even a young child, immediately dispersible, and maybe Dr. Lee wants to comment on immediate, because he talked about immediately dissolves, and so you put it in the child's mouth, it's immediately dispersible. I'm not sure if it tastes good. Have you tasted any of your preparations, Dr. Lee? You can make it taste good. Oh, okay. See that? Whatever you want, he's ready. Okay. But there certainly are other things, and you mentioned mini tablets. I do worry about mini tablets. I guess they're used in Europe more. Dr. Tuleu, are you familiar with the use of mini tablets in pediatrics?
Yeah, because there's been lots of work around safety and swallowability of those small dosage form. The added advantage, whether, because we talk about mini tablets, but, pellets, it's just another process, manufacturing way, but it's the same principle. They are small solids, and in theory, you can adapt the dose. So it's in a liquid in that way. However, it requires a device. And that adds further complication on, lots of people have been doing research on a device to adjust the dose as you would with a liquid, or you play with the packaging to have different strength. So, it's probably the least candy-like. If we're going back to the candy world, because it's supposedly easier to swallow because it's smaller, but you bring another, then there is a kind of like an alien mouthfeel issue, a bit like you would have, with oral dispersible, but you can make it taste neutral because you can coat them. So that you kind of answer one challenge, but then you have you kind of open another one, and I don't think it's very it's the most candy-like dosage form. But again, it really depends on your indication. It depends, of the need for fine-tuning in dosing. It depends on so many things, but this is certainly, a consideration for some project, the development project.
Yeah, thank you. I'm on the organizing committee for a workshop, an FDA PQRI, Product Quality Research Institute workshop that's going to be held at the end of February on pediatric formulations, and several of the people from industry on there, particularly the ones from Europe, are very intent on switching over to mini tablets, and I understand that from a stability standpoint and dosage flexibility standpoint. That makes sense. So that looks like an up and coming way to approach this particular problem, although you're worried about aspiration, right?
I guess at first glance, I would be worried about aspiration, but again, there are studies out there already not showing any risk of choking. Now, again, these were controlled studies, so what would happen in real life, we'd have to see, but there isn't enough, I think, clinical experience in the United States with them yet to determine, but we'll see.
And mini tablets, by the way, are not listed on the official dosage forms. Or maybe our OPQ colleague wants to comment, but there is. I don't think there is. It's a pellet. Is that right? Maybe it's a pellet. But it's not official yet. Okay, well let's talk about sugar, because sugar was mentioned, and but when I think of the amount of sugar kids get and everything else, does it really matter that there's sugar in these dosage forms if they're taking their vitamins with gummies from a dental standpoint?
So from a dental standpoint, if their source of sugar is a gummy, if the gummy has sugar in it, honestly, I don't have a problem with it, as long as it's consumed breakfast, lunch, dinner. Because when it's being consumed and masticated, our salivary glands are going, saliva's clean and everything, it gets cleared. 2 gummies a day will not cause a cavity, whether it has 5 milligrams of sugar in it or 15 milligrams of sugar. It's the constant source of sugar throughout the rest of the day, the duration, the frequency. I don't have a problem with gummies having sugar. And our gummies, we use sucralose. It was a sugar-free sweetener just so that we could try our best to make it as less of a cariogenic environment as possible.
Oh, sugar-free. What did you use?
Sucralose.
Sucralose, okay. How about sorbitol? We're actually, we just did kind of an analysis of products that have sorbitol, and because there's some very well documented problems with children and the amount of sorbitol they get. Even so, for new products, their bioequivalence is tested in adults. It's not tested in children for ethical reasons. And so we've had experience with one particular product in which the levels in children, although it was bioequivalent and when tested in adults, when we gave that product to children, the levels of this anti-HIV drug were actually much lower than expected, and so we actually had to adjust the product labeling. But we're looking at the amount of sorbitol that per dose, and that includes generic products. We're working with some colleagues in the Office of Generic Drugs, because generic drugs, remember, don't have to have the same, although they have to have bioequivalence, they don't have to have the same excipients. That's proprietary. And so generic products can have lots of sorbitol in it when perhaps the original product did not. And so we're setting limits on sorbitol, and I don't know about the other.
So we did consider pretty much all of the sugar alcohols, erythritol, sorbitol, xylitol, you name the tol, we kind of looked at it. Common knowledge for any of the sugar alcohols that can have an effect of diarrhea, and that's the last thing I want in my office for a patient who's undergoing a dental procedure for a long period of time. And it depends on how much of the sugar alcohol may be consumed and how that might affect each individual patient. So that's why we really try to stay away from any of the sugar alcohol sweeteners, specifically for that reason.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may,
yes.
I mean, this is a huge issue with liquids, because you give more in volume and you're probably more likely to be exposed to more polyols. Probably less so in solid dosage form, where in general, the amount you're ingesting is lower.
Yes, good point. Thank you. Okay, so I wanted to mention about dissolution, because dissolution of these products was mentioned by our USP colleague, I believe, and there was actually, if you go back and look at the October, we had a workshop. It was sponsored by FDA, and it was over Shady Grove on October the 12th, and it was came out of the Office of Generic Drugs. But we had a very nice full day workshop on modeling. Well, it was on drug absorption in children and modeling drug absorption, but dissolution is a critical part of that, and so dissolution testing, when you're thinking about pediatric populations, has to be very specific for the pediatric population of interest. And so I would just wanted to mention that. Okay, let's talk about adherence. And Dr. Meyers, do you want to talk about whether you think these dosage forms, candy-like dosage forms, would actually be positive for pediatric adherence? I assume we're talking about long-term therapy, right?
Yeah, I guess that would be my first question, because I think it's a little different in your situation where you need them to take it and they have to take it right now in a one-off procedure. But when we're talking about a medication that needs to be taken daily, of course, adherence is very important. But again, I think that we need to get away from the idea that it has to taste delicious for the patient to take it. I have had patients in the hospital where, one in particular I can remember, where the mother said, no, I can't take him home. This was her 15-year-old who was sitting playing on an Xbox. because he can't take oral medicine. He's going to need to stay in the hospital to take his IV antibiotic for pneumonia to complete the 10 days of therapy. So I think we need to, there's issues. Again, we talk about parenting styles. So we have those kinds of issues. But we need to get away from the idea that we need to make it taste absolutely delicious for a kid to take it. It needs to just be acceptable. And again, I think that solid oral dosage forms are a great way to go with that, and trying to teach more children how to accept those oral solid dosage forms, because you get away from taste completely.
Yes, and Dr. Tuleu, do you want to mention, because you talked about training kids to take solid dosage forms?
Yeah, I mean, that's what Rachel talked about. It's a big scheme in England where they try because it's been shown that, for very life-saving important medication, for example, HIV medication, that has a tendency to be extremely poorly palatable, you can train the kids very early on to transition even to quite a large solid dosage form, tablets or capsule. And I mean, there is an economical push as well, because those dosage forms are cheaper than liquids, and if they exist as a solid dosage form, and why not training the kids to do it if they can do it safely? And I believe as well that it's a healthy early habit forming for possibly adults later on that will have to take dosage form, because we have a lot of adults as well that are struggling to swallow solids. So I guess if you kind of start early on, that could be a very longer positive outcome, I guess. So yeah, we've got those resources that can be used within hospitals, but they don't need any necessarily any specific healthcare professional. If it's resources that are available for the world, I guess, to train the kids to transition to solid, if there is the right strength, obviously, of the medicine.
Yes, thank you. And I'll read one comment we got online. It says, as a clinician and problematic drug use specialist, I would like to know why it should be preferable for kids not knowing what they're taking is a medication. We have a responsibility to educate children to differentiate between a medication and something that is not. So that would fall into that same category of, if a kid's going to be on a medication long term, then we ought to really educate them, train them, and maybe that doesn't mean covering up something and giving them something that's really good to take.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that, both as a pharmacist who counsels patients and also just with my own children. I always explain to them why they're getting what they're getting. Of course, my favorite example is my daughter when she was about 6 and she was going for her flu shot. And I was telling her about what the flu is and how terrible it is, and this is going to help prevent you from getting it, or at least not getting as sick. And when the nurse came in, she just started screaming that she would rather get the flu. So you have to explain it, but make sure that they're still going to make a rational choice.
Okay, thank you. Now, my world revolves around pediatric patients, but I want to be open-minded here. Are there other patient populations, in fact, that could benefit by these other candy-like dosage forms? And I have to admit that my wife likes to take her vitamins in the morning as gummies. She likes gummies. So are there other patient populations? Anybody in the audience or panelists want to mention beyond pediatrics?
Companion animals, if we're considering them as patients. I mean, making as treats for cats or dogs, or that's the.
Okay.
Or even just masking, pellets for fish or whatever, that's.
I don't think Brandon invited the Center for Veterinary Medicine, but that could have been one of our centers here.
It's a big market.
It's a huge market.
All right, so sounds like.
I just want to mention, my father's a veterinarian, so I was taught how to give medications to animals from a very young age, and it is a very difficult population, and there's a lot of parallels with pediatrics.
Yeah, there is.
Okay.
I would like to mention also, I think for our special need adult population.
Yeah.
That is a definite population that is usually underserved and overlooked, so I appreciate even the question of that. But I know there are more sugar-free gummy vitamins catered towards the adult population than the pediatric population, like a lot. We're in the pediatric population when it comes to chewable vitamins. I think there's 2 maybe available on the U.S. market. So for those patients who have insulin-dependent diabetes, regardless of age, I think that's something to be considered.
Okay, good. Thank you, Annie. Are there any other questions from the audience?
Can I just add on to that in terms of sugar content? I was actually thinking about our diabetic patients when I inquired from the company that makes acetaminophen chewable tablets, how much sugar is in there, and when they told me they couldn't tell me, all I could think was, well, then how are my patients with diabetes going to account for that in their insulin dosing? So I think we need to make sure it's very clear how much sugar is in the product so that we can account for that. We also have patients on ketogenic diet who need to know this information, and so we need to be open in our labeling.
Okay, we'll get our labeling people working on that. Maybe our lawyers. We have lots of lawyers. Okay, well, we're the only thing standing between you and lunch, so thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. We have one more comment by. Please come to the microphone.
Yeah, I would like to comment about chewable gels for dentistry. I think this is the trick here, that if I understood correctly, this is compounding with expiration day 14 days. So this is the trick. When it's only 14 days, so there are possibilities that you can formulate a very precise dose, and it will be stable 14 days, because we don't talking about 3 years or something like this. Another case, what is, I think, regarding the dissolution, for example. So we recommended for dietary supplements, because dietary supplements are not regulated and we don't have any clinical data. So we would like to that product at least show the release during a certain amount of time. I mean, using dissolution as quality control in order to be sure that it's released when it's orally taken for potential absorption. So in this case, I mean, I don't know if we can extrapolate for this case. Again, I mean, we are not dictate USP like what should do in other prescription drug, because here they have clear clinical effect that they measured the sedation, and so finally, so I think it's completely different story. Compounding chewable gels for easy taking for some medical needs from the, for example, long, I mean, it's like OCD, which is 3 years expiration date on the shelves. So this is just my comment.
Yes, thank you. That's an important point. Actually, extemporaneous formulations is a big part of what they do in a pediatric hospital. Every pediatric hospital has their extemporaneous formulations recipes, and they're just for short-term use, and often stability is not tested, absorption is not tested. They're problematic. We'd like to minimize the use of those. Obviously there is a place in helping patients, but we'd like to see that the use minimized for extemporaneous formulations, which is what this would be. Yeah, there's a comment in back.
Yes, I have several comments, but the whole thing about Dr. Chin's formulation is that he's a pediatric dentist, has the gummy bears made by a registered pharmacist. It's given one time, and the final conclusion, it works. It works. Yes.
So your point is there's a place for this in treating patients.
Yes, because it works.
Yeah, and we wouldn't deny that. Okay. Well, thank you very much. We're standing between you and lunch, so we'll be happy to see you after lunch at still same starting time for session 3, which would be 1:30. Okay, so you get a couple extra minutes for lunch. Thank you very much.
And I should say, as a dentist, I know how to have fun. So there are gummy teeth in the back. Anyone who wants gummy teeth, they can have it. My kids know on Halloween they can have as much candy as they want, and on November 1st, it's gone.
All right, thank you.